Penn State fans, how are you? I'm Bob Flounders. Johnny McGonigal joins me. It is Wednesday before we were about to get a ton of rain later this week, but excited to talk to Johnny. We're kind of taking a new step in the Blue White Breakdown podcast where we're actually going to do a little bit more of actually. We're not going to produce it, but we're freed up maybe to do it a little bit differently this year. We'll see how it goes. But Johnny, 2024 Media Day is in the books. I talked with Max Ralph earlier in the week. We focused a lot, I think, on the defense, and rightly so. But there was so much more to get to from that with Penn State less than a month from opening at West Virginia. We're also going to take some questions and comments from the tech subscribers. There's 3 or 4 of them in there that I wanted to get to with Johnny. But before I go any further, Johnny, how are you? I know you safely made it back to, I think, the Philadelphia area from Penn State Media Day. It was kind of a crazy weather day, but we got a chance to hear from and talk to a lot of people. We persevered. I know you were you're working on a feature for kind of a cover story from Penn Live and the Patriot News that we're going to run a little bit later this month, and you are determined to get to all angles when it comes to Drew Aller now is in his second year as starter. So how did you feel like your day played out? And also, before we talk to you about a couple things, what just struck you? You've been around enough media days and enough teams at the start of August. Anything different? Anything like whether it's the mood or whether it's something somebody said? Is there anything that kind of jumps out to you?
Yeah, Bob, I'm doing well. You mentioned the rain coming later in the week. In Philly, we got it last night. I mean, I think it's gonna keep coming. Unfortunately, I think it's Hurricane Debbie, right? Is it Debbie? I think it's Debbie who's bringing.
It's just not an intimidating name for a hurricane. They got it. I'm not scared by Debbie. I'm not.
I'm not either. But I do not love the rain.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I was sitting inside last night when I went and played trivia. Our team came in third, Bob, at the Boozy Mutt in Philly.
Oh my God, that's a great name for. Oh, now.
So Bob,
I'm excited to find that place.
So you'll love it. It's not a dive bar.
Is it in downtown Philadelphia or in the burbs?
It's in Philly. It's in Fairmount.
Ooh. Is it
it's a dog bar.
Ooh.
The Boozy Mutt.
Okay.
A aptly named bar, owned by one of my buddies who's a Penn State grad as well and listener of the podcast.
Man, I'm there. I'm so there.
We'll have to do maybe a live pod at some point, Bob, from the Boozy Mutt and hook up with.
Well, I don't know that the audience would be really ready for a live broadcast.
Yeah, that was a good time.
So
trivia was fun. Came in third. A little heartbroken. We didn't come in first, but
was there a question that you should have had? Was there a question that you could have gotten that would have made you elevate it that you missed, or was
the one category, Bob, was words that end in THE, and the clue was like happy and lighthearted. And we didn't know. And I was like, I think it might be Blythe, but we didn't put it down. And it was that. I got a couple of hard ones, though. I'm not going to be too hard on myself.
How did you have Blythe in your vocabulary? That's impressive.
Words are our job, right, Bob?
Well, I mean, if you could use it in a sentence this year,
I'll do my best.
On a Penn State story, then I'll be like, okay, man, I got it.
There we go. So any listeners of this podcast on Wednesday, August 7th, hearing us talk about this, if you are reading one of my stories, I'll drop it in like October, November. I'll find a spot for it.
Don't force it. You can't force it.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's got to be natural. It's got to come to you. Cool. And any listeners of this podcast reading that specific story, it'll be if you know situation. But no, back to Media Day. It was good. I mean, I think there were some hiccups in terms of talking to some of the guys there. Some of the guys had other obligations, and Drew, we weren't able to speak to for the full hour. But feel like I got enough from him and some other coaches and teammates and stuff for for a feature I'm working on later this month. Was able to talk to a lot of different people. And you asked about the mood, Bob, and I think it's something we'll kind of talk about a little bit more in depth with the offense specifically. Just the guys seem lighter. They seem more, they seem looser. They seem more confident. And that shone through, too, towards the end of spring ball as they started to get more comfortable with the installs of the new offense with Andy Kotelnicki. And just talking to them, talking to those guys, not only Drew, but Bo Prabula and Nick Singleton and even Jaywan Sider, the running backs coach. Like, I feel like there's more confidence in what this offense is going to do for this team this year. And I know that we'll be talking about that a little bit more on this pod, but that was one of my main takeaways.
Yeah. I know we got to hear from a lot of guys, including Kotelnicki, but just to stay with the offense, I think you had something out on social media. I believe you were talking to Jaywan Sider, Penn State's running backs coach, and you'd written, I think, earlier this week on Penn Live about the run game and what kind of they're capable of, and maybe it could be a lot better this year for many different reasons. But just reading your stuff and looking at some of the answers to some of the questions, I thought the Ohio State game last year, the 20-12 game in the Horseshoe, that really very deflating day for James Franklin and his program. Their hopes were high, kind of a toss-up game. Offense, clearly, I'm not going to rehash it, but they sputtered just about the entire game. You could focus on a lot of things, but Jaywan Sider, I think you asked him a question about the running backs and kind of maybe some other things, and he had an interesting answer to, I thought, about the Ohio State game, and it kind of had to do with maybe the way the offense was run last year, and also maybe the approach of a former offensive coordinator, perhaps.
Yeah, perhaps. So I asked Jaywan specifically, with the new offense and Andy Kotelnicki, is there more confidence that not only will the running game be more explosive, but also prioritized? And so I didn't even ask about the fact that Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen had 9 carries each, only 9 carries each at Ohio State. Yep. That's something that Jaywan brought up. And I thought it was a really illuminating quote. I'll just read it. He said, "In a lot of ways, you feel like you wasted 2 elite players because they didn't touch it enough, it being the ball. That's not good for anybody when you have these 2 horses and you don't feed them. I don't think they touched the ball in the fourth quarter at Ohio State. As coaches, you go back and think of what you could have done differently in those games. That was one." And he continued, basically saying that Michigan, won a national title with great defense and complementary football. It's okay to get 6 yards on first down, then hand it to the running back again, and it might be for 26 or 30 yards on the next play. That's what we didn't do a good job of enough, coming back to those kids. And so when you look at the stats, Kaytron and Nick actually had more combined carries last year than they did the year prior, but the production was down, certainly way down in the explosive play category. And I think a part of that was, for example, Nick Singleton, his first 2 carries at Ohio State, 20 and 18 yards. And then that was on the second or third drive of the first quarter, and he gets only 7 carries from that point forward. And I think that was a big knock, obviously just the overall production and the way that they lost, to Ohio State and Michigan, reason why Mike Yurcich was fired as offensive coordinator in season. But more specifically, the running game, the way that Nick and Kaytron broke out as true freshmen, and there was so much confidence in those 2 and the running game as a whole going into last season. And to see it sputter that way, it felt like, at times, and especially at Ohio State, I think Drew had 42 pass attempts at Ohio State. That Yurcich just kind of de-emphasized maybe the running game in a way that didn't allow them to get into a rhythm. And so it just felt like they were kind of battering rams out there at times and just trying to get 3-4 yards. And it just wasn't good. And I think there's confidence around the program, around the Lasch building, that Andy Kotelnicki's addition, given what he's done at his previous stops, that not only is it going to help Drew Aller in the passing offense, but perhaps more crucially, especially in those bigger games, when you go on the road, the running game too.
Yeah. No, not to play devil's advocate, but I'm just thinking about that Ohio State game and that Michigan game. And when you have your two best players really not being, more prominent in the attack, I would say that, another problem in that game was, I think Penn State and Ohio State were tied early in that game, 3-3 or 6-6 or whatever it was. But when they fell behind, it's easier to stay with the run when you have a lead. I'm not saying that I'm not agreeing with what Yurcich did, but in both those games, Penn State was kind of in the trailing position, I think, for the majority of it, and I think that strategy to give them instead of giving them 18 total touches, giving them a lot closer to 30 total touches, maybe on the ground, and maybe throwing a couple passes to them like they did later in the year. I think it's a little bit easier to do when you're playing from in front. But yeah, it was definitely that game was such a panicky situation, I thought, with the way that it was called by Penn State. They had a plan going in, and I think they definitely did abandon it too much, and to have Drew throw 42 times against a defense like that on the road, there's not really a path. There's not really a path to victory. You wonder what would have happened if Kalen King didn't get called for that penalty and that defensive touchdown stayed up, and maybe they could do a little bit more. But I'm with you. I think Kotelnicki, I think he's a guy that believes in balance, creativity, and I do think that he realizes he's got some weapons that he's probably never had before at his disposal. Yeah. And I'm anxious to see what he will do. And I'm really anxious to see what Drew can do in the passing game, because I'm still kind of holding my breath just when it comes to the wideouts. And I think a lot of people are, but they're saying all the right things, Johnny, but we've heard them say all the right things before. So I just think the first month of the season, beginning in the first week, I just really need to see I need to see a little bit more variety, and I need to see some guys getting open. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And so just to kind of take you into my thinking a little bit going into Media Day was, I feel like ever since Andy came aboard, and it makes sense because the passing game had its serious issues last year, the wide receivers, we know all about that. Drew said himself to me in April that he had a good but not good enough year as a first-year starter. And so I do feel like, and obviously it's a quarterback, so it's going to drive a lot of attention and a lot of focus, that ever since Andy came aboard, a lot of the way that people, us in the media and fans have been thinking is, okay, how is Andy going to help Drew Aller? And that is a huge part of it still. But going into Media Day, I just felt like it was a little bit of an overlooked deal with the running game and how Andy's going to help the running game. And so just delving into the stats ahead of time before even talking to Jaywan and asking him that question and getting a really good answer. I was looking at some of the stats, and, obviously Penn State was explosive in 2022 in the running game. Nick Singleton was second in the country in runs of 40 yards or more. Last year, Penn State had 6 runs of 30 yards or more as a team, which ranked near the bottom of the country. And 2 of those 30-yard runs were from
Smith had one, I think.
I think Tank Smith might have had one. Bo Perbula had 2. So it really, it wasn't really coming from Nick. I think Ketron had a couple, but you look at what Kansas did over their last 2 seasons with Andy at the helm, 27 runs of 30 yards or more. Only 3 power conference teams had more than that in the last 2 years. And so while obviously a big focus, and it is important, very important, to Penn State and what they want to do this year to key in on how Andy is going to open up the passing offense and create space for a wide receiver room that struggled last year in creating separation and obviously had time to improve. But I don't think they're going to become, A-plus stars overnight necessarily, those guys. So you kind of have to scheme them up a bit. But I think if you don't even necessarily have to scheme up that much for the running game when you have talented players like Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. And the overarching theme with Andy Kotelnicki has been he's going to get the ball in his best player's hands. And it seems so simple, but man, last year at Ohio State, Nick and Katron are two of the best players on the offense, and they really were kind of, taken out of the game essentially. And it happened at other times too. Like there were even points in games that they won last year where it was like, why are they not just going back to them? Go back to the well. And they didn't. So I really think that whether that's in the running game or even in the passing game with Nick and Katron, something that they've really worked on over the offseason. I think you're just going to see more of those too. And I think that's just a good thing for Penn State. That's a good thing for Drew Allar. That's a good thing for a program that's, looking to push into the playoff picture this year.
Yep. Johnny, this is a great segue. We got some questions and comments from our Penn State Tech subscribers. And this is going to shock. This first question is going to really shock you, but I still think it builds upon everything you were saying, and I was going to ask it probably anyway after how you just talked about Kotelnicki and Drew and the running game. So try not to be too surprised when I rattle this one off. You ready?
Okay. Yeah, I'm ready.
Is Beau Pribula going to get a fair chance to prove he is the quarterback, or are we 100% behind Drew Allar? I would just add on that, Johnny. I think the bigger question is really, will Andy Kotelnicki get Beau Pribula, who is a gifted player, more touches and more involved in the offense?
First of all, do you have who the question's from? Let's give him a shout out.
A lot of the times they just put their number down and they don't sign it with anything. I would love to give this guy a shout out, and I try to do that when they do. It's all I have is his email. I could give out his phone number.
We don't need to do that.
I think then he's probably not going to be a Tech subscriber much longer.
That's fair. Well, whoever asked the question, thank you for dropping this note. I actually have a story, and again, we're recording this Wednesday morning. I've got a story coming out Thursday morning on how Andy Kotelnicki might use Beau Pribula. And talking to Kotelnicki, to answer the question, like Drew is the starter. Beau is the backup. That's not going to change unless there's an injury to Drew or something. But that doesn't mean that Beau is not going to have a role in this offense, and not like a garbage time role. Like I think that he might legitimately be utilized. And that's just going off of what Andy Kotelnicki has told us. I mean, when I sat down with him in April and talked to him, he said the same thing that he's saying now. And when we talked to him at Media Day, he said Beau Pribula has elite athleticism, and it's something that we need to tap into. And how do you tap into that? Well, last year when Beau got on the field, it was a lot of QB draw, a lot of just read option. Am I going to hand it off? Am I going to keep myself? Pretty simple stuff. I think how Andy utilized his mobile quarterbacks at Kansas was more intricate, more creative. Used a bit of option, whether that was power option, speed option with pitching, keeping, a lot of motions. You get like the orbit motion from wide receiver coming around to provide that pitch option. There's just a lot of different things that if you go and just pull up any game tape, any ESPN 8-minute highlight package from a Kansas game last year or in 2022, and you can see the way that he utilized the athleticism of the quarterbacks that he had in Kansas. And I think that Beau is going to be able to provide some of that. Even Drew. I mean, I asked James at Media Day about the relationship with Drew and the quarterbacks and Andy and Danny O'Brien, who is the quasi quarterbacks coach. And James went on this very long answer, but one of the little snippets in there was basically there's going to be some things that Drew is going to be doing that you guys might not expect him to be able to do, but if he does enough of it, basically it'll put defenses on their heels and allow them to attack defenses better. And I kind of read it. I mean, maybe Drew is going to be running a little option. Like, I think everything is kind of on the table with Andy, and he's been a play caller for 19 years. He knows what works. He knows what doesn't work. And you asked Drew, you asked Beau about watching the Kansas film, and they were really excited when he came aboard, and they were really excited with how they were utilized and the installs that they already had in spring camp. And so it's a confident group, and I think they have reason to believe that Drew is going to be better and Beau is going to be utilized.
Yeah,
and I don't think that's lip service. I think Beau will have a role this year.
Yeah, and I think the one untapped thing, honestly, I'm more of. I mean, if you just look at his skill set, I wouldn't hesitate to use him as a receiver, just because he has the skill set to be really a big problem if they get him the ball in any kind of space. It's going to be hard to get him down on the ground. And I just think, it's not. I mean, I just remember Julian Edelman was a quarterback in college, and he turned it. I mean, I'm not drawing that parallel, but I think that when you look at Bo's skill set, could totally see it. I would at least mess around with it because I think he could handle it. But yeah, when you're having trouble creating big plays in the passing game, and you got a guy who's a big play threat, whether he's running it or throwing it, why wouldn't you let him catch it in space and just see what happens? I bet you we see that a couple times this year, Johnny.
Or even remember how Joe Moorhead used Tommy Stevens?
Yeah.
Lined him up in the slot, brought him into motion, and had him like a little pop pass or a little handoff, and he goes around the edge. Andy was saying the other thing he said, Pribula has elite athleticism, and then he expanded on that a little bit and said that he has elite change of direction. And he said probably top 1% of college quarterbacks in terms of change of direction. And you watch that. I mean, the way that Bo sticks his foot in the ground on a keeper and gets upfield, very few quarterbacks, very few college, Big Ten athletes can do that in general. And I think that's going to be, and again, whether it's in an option, like a straight speed option, whether it's him getting the ball on an end around, I think Andy and Penn State are going to use that to their advantage. And, we heard about it last summer, and that's why, if you're a fan and you want to see Bo Pribula out there, you heard last year James Franklin talk about, Bo being a part of the game plan and a package for him and everything. And it really wasn't utilized in non-garbage time.
Yeah.
Aside from at the end of the season when Mike Yurcich wasn't there, maybe that was a common denominator. Who knows? But I think under Andy Kotelnicki, I think Bo is going to have a legitimate role.
Yeah, I agree. Another question from the offensive question. This guy's name, well, his email is DavyPSU, so at att.net. So I feel pretty comfortable saying this is from Davy. Is
it Davy Jones?
It's not Davy Jones. No, it's not Davy Jones. I wish. We're going to have him on a podcast at some point. I'm just preparing mentally to have him on a podcast, probably before the Ohio State game. And but I just have to prepare for one of his 18-minute answers about a question that I ask him, but he doesn't answer the question. He just goes on some kind of tangent. I'm just preparing. I'm getting ready mentally to just kind of wait that one out. But I definitely want to have him on. Maybe not for Ohio State. Maybe for another game earlier in the season. But it would be. I do miss podcasting with him. But we'll see. But this is not Dave Jones. Anyway, this one is pretty. This one's got a little bit of everything. I actually like the very end of it. Okay. First of all, here it is. It's like rapid fire. I feel like Tom Allen asked this question because it's got so many layers to it. I could tell it's got a lot. All right. Sugar huddle, ? What percentage did Kotelnicki use it in the Kansas offense? Big plays percentage when doing the sugar huddle. Who will be the first conference head coach this year, not named Harbaugh, to defeat Ohio State? So I think we'll start with just the sugar huddle concept. Johnny, I think you're probably familiar with it. I just had to Google it so I know what it is, but it's kind of a sprint to the line of scrimmage and snapping the ball quickly to kind of confuse the defense. I believe that's what it is. And any thoughts at all about the sugar huddle in Penn State?
So I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I don't want to blow smoke. We don't get all 22 cut-ups, full game cut-ups.
I know.
We're just kind of working off, whatever we see on YouTube. So I haven't been able to, nail down whether or not that's a thing. I wouldn't be surprised if it is. I mean, I like it whenever it happens. It always, it honestly just even excites me a little bit. It's they're ready to go. They're going to do something crazy. So, I'm sure it's under consideration, but at the same time, I'm not sure.
Isn't that just kind of an offshoot of, remember Billy O'Brien, when he was there, he had the NASCAR package. And I think when Moorhead was here, they would get a first down and they just go quick. Now that's not technically what the sugar huddle is, but I think absolutely Andy would probably do that because you have the defense. I know there's some substitution issues, but at times. But I think when you have the defense kind of on their heels, I could see him being a guy that goes for the jugular.
For sure. Yeah, I agree. What was the other part of that?
So the first Big Ten coach not named Harbaugh this year, because he's no longer there, so it's impossible, to beat Ohio State. Or maybe it's not just this year, it's just the next one to beat Ohio State, period. I think the easy answer might be when they go to Oregon this year, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, let's look at Ohio State's 2025 schedule. No, I'm kidding. I think the answer would be I don't think Michigan is beating Ohio State this year. I think Oregon has the best shot of beating them this year
at home. Yeah,
at home, and they're loaded. I mean, Oregon is legitimately loaded. Not quite Ohio State loaded. Like, I think there's a gap between Georgia and Ohio State, and then Oregon, Texas, like Bama, Ole Miss territory. But I think Dan Lanning and Oregon have the best chance of beating Ohio State in the regular season this year. Beyond that, I believe Ohio State opens with Texas next year. And yeah, obviously Ohio State could lose in the playoff. We're not, we don't know the opponents there. But I guess that would be a Quinn Ewers.
Yeah, I think he just asked about a Big Ten team too, though. So we'll just
Big Ten. Yep. Yeah, I would go with Dan Lanning in Oregon.
I think that would be the obvious choice, and you don't want to. I would not dismiss Penn State, but knowing the record they have and the way that's going to be, and it's not going to be a whiteout. It's going to be tough, I think, for Penn State.
Also, there's a little kind of a little loophole there where he said the first Big Ten coach, Penn State plays Ohio State after Ohio State plays Oregon. So I'm going to go with Dan Lanning in Oregon because if Ohio State loses this year in the regular season, I think it's at Oregon.
Yeah. Hey, just I was just curious. So when that AP coaches poll came out earlier this week, who gave Michigan a first place vote? Is it that obvious, or like what's going on there?
Well, Sharon Moore, to my knowledge, was not a part of the coaches poll. I think the only Big Ten coaches who voted, James Franklin. Now, again, when I say the coaches voting, like, is James Franklin doing what I do and like breaking down film and like reading, all these stories? Like, a lot of times I think it's probably the media relations people that help out and do a little bit with that. But the Penn State or the Big Ten coaches were Franklin, Ryan Day, Dave Braun from Northwestern, Mike Loxley from Maryland, and I think Dan Lanning actually at Oregon, I think is the other one. So maybe it was one of the Big Ten coaches who did that. I don't know. Yeah. I really don't know. But yeah, Michigan got one first place vote. I think of the 55 first place votes, Georgia got 46. Yeah. And then Ohio State got like 7, and then 1 or 2 sprinkled in for Texas. But I do think there's a pretty clear top 2 in Georgia and Ohio State, and then a next like a 1B tier in Oregon and Texas, and then you kind of get from honestly 5 to like 10. Could go. You could interchange, I think.
All right, Johnny, let's conclude with one more question from Penn Live's Penn State Tech subscribers. Always appreciate hearing from them. I hope more people will join in season when we're doing a lot more with mailbags and questions and comments and podcasts and stuff like that. So when I read this question, we've already talked quite a bit about Drew and Kotelnicki, but we can fold some of the other parts of the team into this question. Just wondering how everyone is feeling with 2 new coordinators. It's actually 3. 2 new coordinators, a second-year quarterback with a ton of upside, but yet unproven, a partially revamped O-line, and a wide receiver room with a few questions heading into week 1 against a solid West Virginia team on the road, coming off a good 2023, and a solid repeat staff and players. I think he's talking about West Virginia, with nothing to lose, West Virginia, and everything to gain.
Yeah, I think I love the question. It's kind of, if we want to take a step back and look bigger picture, which is kind of what the question does. I mean,
yep.
With the coordinator changes, you have the quarterback in place, you have revamped offensive line. I think the defense is returning a lot of talent, but obviously you lose, a first round, edge rusher. You lose even Adisa Isaac, your leading tackles for loss guy last year. You lose 3 corners. Moving Abdul up to edge rusher, a Tony Rojas, who I wrote about for yesterday. So if the readers haven't checked that out, I think there's a lot of belief in Tony Rojas at linebacker. But yeah, there are moving parts. It's not to the extent of like in Alabama, who obviously like sees Saban retire and 28 guys leave via the portal. So it's not that quite of a reset. I think there's a lot of good returning production for this team, but when it comes to leadership, captains, there's a question there who's going to step up and be the captains this year. You talk about the coordinators, week 1, there might be some kinks, with offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and Justin Lustig, the special teams coordinator as well. So yeah, there's some change going on. There's change everywhere in college football. I think, having Franklin in place for so long, I think does help in terms of, the stability of the program. But going into week 1 with some serious, some question marks, it's definitely something to wonder and something to consider as they enter the season.
Yeah, West Virginia, not too far away. They do have quite a bit coming back, especially at some key positions, and that's not a fun place to play. Tough to open day or night down there. But I mean, I think if you're good enough, and you look at the 2022 Penn State team, if you're good enough, you find a way to win against a team like this. And I think if you can't win that game, then you could still improve off of that effort. I'm very curious about the West Virginia game myself. I think that's a pretty good coach on that sideline. I think he does know some things. I do like that quarterback. I just hope, if I was a Penn State fan, I wouldn't just associate last year's game with this year's game, because I just think when you get Penn State away from Beaver Stadium, it's just not quite the same. That's quite an intimidating environment, especially in a whiteout. It'll be a different atmosphere. And I think that it's going to be it'll be a much more competitive game this time around. But yeah, we got plenty of time, Johnny, to talk about that. Anything else on your plate? Anything else you're working on that our listeners or our viewers, I keep forgetting that people actually watch us and not just listen to us, need to know about?
No, I mean, I just had one more note, I guess, on West Virginia. It's just like to reiterate your point, like, I think this West Virginia team coming into this year is better than the one Penn State faced last year. And you saw them grow as the season went on. I mean, entering the year, Neil Brown was firmly on the hot seat down there in Morgantown, and, opening with an expected loss at Penn State, I think heightened it just a little bit. But the way that they were able to rebound, I believe they finished 9-4 last year. I mean, they were a tough out for a lot of teams in the Big 12. And so I think it will be a more difficult game. I just can't wait for the season to start at this point, Bob. Like once you get media day and camp is underway, like a part of me is like, oh, like the summer's ending. Like I love it. Summer's my favorite season.
Right.
Like, but at the same time, that means fall is just rolling around, and it's going to be here in a few weeks. So very much looking forward to it. We'll have a lot on Penn Live. You asked if there's anything I'm working on. I mean, we have so much still banked from interviews that we did at Media Day. And I know that we're going to be rolling out a lot more. And just, if anyone's listening to this or watching this today on Wednesday, check out the Bo Perbula piece that I have tomorrow morning, Thursday morning. I think any fans who want to see more of Bo will be a little bit more encouraged by his possible role this upcoming season by reading that.
So when you say any fans that want to see more of Bo, you mean 99.4% of the fan base?
Yeah. I mean, look, there's
oh yeah, I know. It's always the backup, man. It's always the backup.
It is. And you know what? It was the case when Sean Clifford was a starter, and he had his struggles at times. obviously, and did a lot of good things, did some not so good things, and when he did the not so good things, everyone wanted Drew in there.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting now that Drew's on the other side of that. It's just the nature of college football. You always want to see what you don't know. You're always intrigued by that, and I get it. But while Drew is the starter and will be the starter, I do think that they will have a legitimate use for Bo this year. And I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to see it just like everyone else.
Yeah. All right, Johnny, great chatting with you guys. We'll be back next week if we survive Hurricane Debbie, which is just not, hopefully it's not as bad, but I just can't get really, it's not intimidating. I'm not worried about Debbie. If it wasn't like Laverne, that's a little bit more. No, that's not really that. There's got to be a more dangerous name that would cause me to fear wet weather, but Debbie.
Laverne is not scary. I mean, look, also, Bob, we live in PA. I'm sure people down in Florida.
I know. That's why I was like, you know what? Don't be a dummy. Yeah. Like, it's probably going to get a lot worse other places. So I should just stop talking.